All right, here we are with human body part two. We are in the middle of the circulatory system, and we were taking a look at the heart. The blood, the pathway through the heart goes something like this. Deoxygenated blood goes into the right atrium, and then it flows from the right atrium to the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, it flows out through the pulmonary arteries. Okay, it goes out of the pulmonary arteries towards the lungs. After it has been oxygenated in the lungs, it returns to the heart by way of the pulmonary veins and goes into the left atrium, then to the left ventricle. And then you will notice right here on this diagram that the left ventricle is the most muscular chamber of the heart. It contracts and sends blood out through the aorta to the rest of the body. Something to remember. Blood vessels traveling to the heart are called veins. Blood vessels traveling away from the heart are called arteries. Away arteries. So always remember that. It doesn't have anything to do with oxygenated or deoxygenated. Typically arteries are oxygenated. However, the pulmonary artery is not oxygenated. That's sending blood to the lungs. The pulmonary veins are oxygenated. Typically, veins carry deoxygenated blood because it's coming back to the heart. So you got to think about which circuit. Our blood actually goes on in two circuits: body, heart, lungs, heart. So the body heart circuit, arteries typically have oxygenated blood and veins carry deoxygenated blood. But the heart-lung circuit, arteries carry deoxygenated blood, veins carry oxygenated blood. So the artery and vein part, you need to remember simply is whether it's moving towards or away from the heart. So we have the right and left, right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. So blood flows through the heart, enters the right atrium, and this is what I just explained to you. Right ventricle contracts, sending blood to the lungs. That's where in the lungs the blood flows through the capillaries, which are surrounding the alveoli. Remember what those are? Those little sacs in your lungs. This is where gas exchange takes place, and then it delivers the oxygenated blood back to the heart, where it enters the left atrium, and then it flows into the left ventricle, and then flows out the left ventricle into the aorta and moves to all parts of the body. So, arteries always carry blood away from the heart. Veins always carry blood back to the heart. You have capillaries, which are the smallest of blood vessels, and they tend to only be about like a 1 cell thick. And they're located near every cell. They're located they create a net around the alveoli in your lungs, and that's where we have our gas exchange and whatnot like that. When you think about blood pressure, systolic blood pressure is when the heart is contracting. Diastolic blood pressure is when the heart is relaxing. So when you hear of somebody's blood pressure 120 over 80, well, 120 would be when the heart when the heart is contracting, and that's systolic. And then diastolic would be the bottom number, which is when the heart is relaxing. And here you see arteries and veins, and as the blood moves from one side to the other. Now, yes, this diagram is showing red and blue, but remember, that's diagrammatic. That doesn't have anything to do with the color of the blood itself. You would be able to tell the difference between color in color of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, but it's not red and blue. It's bright red for oxygenated, and then darker red or maroon for deoxygenated. All right, the endocrine system. The endocrine system is responsible for creating hormones. Hormones are proteins that will, like enzymes, they help to regulate metabolism because what they do is they carry a signal. So if you think about all the different glands in your body that will create these hormones that cause something to happen someplace else. Your hypothalamus, your pituitary gland, your pineal gland, your thyroid and your parathyroid, the thymus. On top of your kidneys, you have adrenal glands, you have ovaries and testes. All of these are part of the endocrine system. These are glands that create hormones that send a signal someplace else in order to cause something to happen. It causes cells to reproduce. It causes growth to occur. It causes sugar to be transformed into ATP even faster. So you can see here these hormones secreted by these glands in order to cause products to be released, products to be synthesized, causes cells to divide and grow. Some examples would be like epinephrine or norepinephrine, which is the same thing as adrenaline. This is produced by the adrenal glands. You've all heard of the fight or flight. So when the adrenal glands are activated, what that causes to happen is it causes you to breathe faster, which takes in more oxygen, because what else is happening is you're converting sugar into ATP much faster. You're causing glycogen, which is stored sugar, to become glucose, to be converted back into glucose, so that can be converted into or used to generate ATP by your cells, creating that flight mechanism or fight, depending on. So growth stimulating hormone, testosterone and estrogen, which are the hormones that are produced in the ovaries and the testes to create secondary sex characteristics in humans. So the whole point of the endocrine, the name itself, endocrine, means that it's sending a signal someplace else in your body. It's a cell signaling event. So organs in one part of your body, the cells in organs in part of your body are creating a signal that then travels through the bloodstream to someplace else and causes something to happen. Growth or product production or product stopping production. Okay, so all of those things are controlled by the endocrine system. The lymphatic system. Is a system that literally mirrors your circulatory system. And what it does is it collects essentially collects the fluids that seep out of your circulatory system and returns that to the circulatory system. So when you've heard of like, oh, when you're sick, you have your nodes might be swollen. Well, you have various lymphatic nodes all over your body, and they do have a tendency to collect bacteria. And when that happens, you may have an infection there, and so you could end up with swelling of your nodes, swelling of your lymph nodes in various places. The integumentary system. This would be all of your coverings, okay, your skin, your hair, your nails. So all of these are part of your integumentary system. Your skin is the largest organ in your body. So this also contains the integumentary system contains all of the glands that will secrete oils into your skin or onto your skin. It contains your hair follicles. It contains all of the blood vessels and nerve endings. So this would be your integumentary system. The reproductive system is responsible for, just as it says, producing new humans. We've already talked about sexual reproduction and the fact that we have two different kinds of gametes, that the ovaries produce eggs, which are oocytes, and the male testes produce sperm, which is the male gamete. When the male gamete and the female gamete are combined, you get one cell that is a zygote, but it has a completely unique genetic makeup. That will then go through multiple mitotic divisions until you get a ball of cells and ultimately a human or a dog or a cat or whatever is being reproduced. In order to produce those gametes, remember what we've seen in previous lectures. The process by which gametes are produced is called meiosis, meiosis. That produces haploid cells, gametes, that have half the amount of DNA that a normal cell would have. And that's because it's going to be put together with the gamete from another individual in order to make a full complement of DNA, which is called a zygote, until it starts to divide. So here is the the process in males. It takes place in testes. It occurs continually throughout a male's life. The sperm is collected and stored until it is actually used, and it leaves the body through the vas deferens and empties into the urethra. And that's where it will end up ultimately meeting the egg. And here you can see the spermatogenesis, and this does happen throughout a male's life after puberty. Now with females, female egg production does not happen throughout the life. Most of the primary oocytes are actually in place before birth even. They just have to mature. And whenever you have gametogenesis happening in females, you're only going to have one egg produced and then 3 polar bodies. Whereas in a male, when a cell goes through meiosis, it's going to produce 4 cells, and all 4 cells are active sperm cells. But in a female, when a female egg is being produced and you have the pre-oocyte and it goes through meiosis, it's only going to produce 1 egg and then 3 of what are referred to as polar bodies, because they're smaller and they're ultimately just reabsorbed or released. But the reason for that is that the egg contains all of the material that's ultimately going to be in a baby's cells, other than the extra set of chromosomes. All of the cellular machinery, the mitochondria, etc. That's all in the egg already. So every mitochondria that you have in every one of your cells came from your mother. None of those mitochondria came from your father. The only thing that you got from your father was 23 chromosomes, essentially, from a reproductive standpoint. All right, and you can see the maturation of an oocyte here. And it is either, if it is not released, then the wall of the uterus then sloughs off, and that's what happens as a result of the menstruation cycle. If an egg is fertilized and pregnancy takes place, then what happens is the zygote starts to multiply through mitosis, and you end up with a ball of cells, and that ball of cells is called a blastula. And then it starts to invaginate, meaning that it starts to cave in on itself on one side, and that's called gastrulation. And so then it ends up elongating, and through this process you end up with an embryo. And if we're talking about something that has a self-contained egg, you're going to have a yolk sac, which is going to provide nutrition. If it's a mammal, a placental mammal, there's going to be an attachment called the placenta directly to the mother, which is going to be giving the embryo nutrients as well as oxygen, or having gas exchange during the pregnancy, and that of course is attached by way of the umbilical cord. So, but if it's a self-contained egg, it's attached to the yolk sac, and that provides all the nutrition while the baby is developing inside the egg. Here we have, this is obviously a placental mammal, a human, and so it's attached to the uterine wall, and you can see even though the blood vessels are diagrammed here in blue and red, you do have oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood going to and from the baby the whole time that it is developing. Then when birth actually takes place, the baby is expelled from the female's body after uterine contraction. This is the only time we get what is referred to as positive feedback in the hormonal system, where the baby pushing against the inside of the uterine wall triggers a hormone that causes contractions of the uterus. That creates more pressure on the inside of the uterine wall, which then triggers more hormone, which causes more contraction. So that's typically the only time that we find positive feedback in any of the hormonal systems in a human, because typically positive feedback and without stopping doesn't really aid in homeostasis. So this is like the one time that that occurs. And sometimes with humans there have to be what's referred to as a cesarean section, where actually the abdominal wall is cut and the baby is removed that way. And so if you think about our immune system, the immune system is not so much as, I mean, it is a very intense system, but there's not one set of organs necessarily that is part of your immune system. Many of your organs function in an immune capacity. So if we think about different types of diseases, we have communicable diseases, non-communicable. Then we can prevent diseases and also their treatments. And I've got antibiotics here, but that's kind of only if it's bacterial. If it's not bacterial, that's not going to do any good. Communicable diseases, these are things that can be transmitted from one person to another. This usually has some disease-causing agent, like a bacterium or a virus and whatnot like that. Non-communicable diseases are things that are not contagious, things that are congenital, like cancer. You can't catch cancer from somebody else. If somebody has cancer and you go visit them in the hospital, you are not going to get cancer as a result of that. So you can't give it to somebody else. Now it can be passed down from one generation to the next, but that's congenital part. If somebody has heart disease, you can't catch heart disease from them because they have heart disease. That's not going to happen. Some of the things that we can do to prevent diseases, obviously vaccinations, hand washing, and then keeping yourself healthy. Wearing masks. If you know that you are carrying some sort of a contagion like a virus or a bacterium, wearing a mask so that your secretions don't get onto surfaces or onto somebody else. That can also help prevent the transmission of that particular disease. If you have some sort of an infection that's bacterial, antibiotics can help. If it is not bacterial, antibiotics will do no good. Taking an antibiotic for a cold does no good because antibiotics have absolutely no effect whatsoever on a virus. Here's some additional study websites, and as always, make sure to check up on those things that I've listed for the GACE. And with that, that brings Human Body to a close.